Have you ever wanted to go to San Francisco? Well, today is your lucky day, my friend, because we are going to take a look at Ticket to Ride San Francisco, where you are a tourist riding around this town, trying to collect little souvenirs to bring home with you as a memory. Have you ever been to San Francisco? If you have, well, what did you think about it? I have always wanted to go because it seems like a cool city, right? In this video, I am going to show you how to play this game, but also how to set it up. So let's just take a look at it. This here is the setup of the game. In the middle of the gaming area, we have the board. And then we need to place out some souvenir markers. We take the piles with the souvenirs, place them on top of each other and place them out on the spots where there are red markers. We take 2 of these piles and place them to the side for now. Depending on how many players you are in the game, you'd need a different amount of tokens in each pile. If you are 4 players, there should be 3 markers in each of the piles. This is a 3-player game, so here we have 2 markers in each pile. The same thing happens if it is a 2-player game. Then there should also be 2 markers. Now we need to shuffle the transport cards, looking like this. Then we take 2 and hand them out to each player. This is your starting hand. The rest of these cards should be placed face down on the table. Then we need to take the top 5 cards and put them face up next to each other. If there would have been 3 or more of the fairy cards, we would have needed to discard all of them, put them in the bottom of the pile and draw 5 new ones. In this case we only had 1, so it's fine. Now we also need to shuffle the ticket cards, looking like this. Each player gets 2 of these cards, and they need to keep at least 1 of them, but they can keep both of them if they want to. These are the cards that will determine what kind of connections you need to make to score. The rest of the cards are placed next to the playing area for later use. Each player also takes 1 setup of little train wagons, in a color of their choosing. Then they also take their little player marker, and put it on 0 on the board. This is your starting position, and this is the victory point track. The starting player is decided at random, and then we play in clockwise order. Before we start to play, we need to put out the last souvenir tokens on the board. In a game with 3 or 4 players, the last player takes 1 of the piles and places them out on one of the spots that does not have a pile already. Once the last player have placed out their pile, the second last player takes the last pile and places that pile out on a spot of their choosing. In a game with 2 players, the player that is the second one gets to take both piles and place them out on an empty spot on the board. But then the pile should only have 1 souvenir token and not 2. So in this game you are a tourist in San Francisco. You're going around town to try to collect these souvenirs tokens. But you also need to place out your little trains on the map to make the different connections. Plus, you have these ticket cards. That also is a good thing if you manage to fulfill them, because all of this will score your points in the end of the game. And the player with the most points at the end of the game is of course the winner. During each player's turn they can do 3 different actions. Once a player have done their action, that goes to the player to the left, and then they will do their action, and so on. But what can you actually do during your turn? Well, let's take a look at that. First thing you can choose to do is to take a transportation card. And you can take 1 of the faced up out on the table or draw from the pile itself. You can draw 2 of these cards during your turn. But if you choose to draw a fairy card, or if you draw a fairy card from the top pile, you only get to take 1. Whenever there are more than 3 fairy cards out on this market, we need to discard all of these cards, put them in the bottom of the pile, and then take 5 new cards and put them out on the market. So that was the first action, to simply draw 2 or 1 of these transportation cards from either the market or the top of the deck. You can have an unlimited amount of these cards on your hands. There is no roof on how many cards you can have. These cards are now used to determine how many of these little trains you can put out on the map and where you can put them. So the second action you can choose to do is to place out your little trains on these lines and claim one of the connections. To be able to claim a connection, you need to throw away as many transportation cards as there are spots on the connection that you would like to claim. Here, for example, we have 2 blue connections. So we need to throw away 2 blue cards to put out our trains on that connection. You could, however, also use the fairy cards, because these cards represent any color out on the board. So in this case here, we would need to use 1 fairy card and 1 blue card to be able to finish this connection. And the same goes for all of the different connections out on the board, except the gray ones, because the gray ones can be completed by using any card on your hand. Now, next time you want to build a connection out on the board, it does not need to be attached to the one that you have already built. Meaning that you could start a new one over here. It does not need to be connected to the previous one. If you manage to build a connection and reach one of the little souvenir tokens here, and you do not already own that token, you get to take one of them and place them in front of you. Some of these connections have 2 train lines next to each other. And in a 3 or 4 player game, another player can choose to build on the lane next to yours. You cannot, however, build on both lanes. Meaning that if you have built here, you cannot build here. But another player could choose to build a little connection next to yours. But in a 2-player game, this is not possible. Here, only 1 player can build on one of the tracks. Some of the connections have a symbol with a fairy on them, meaning that in this case here, you need to play a fairy card and then a matching color card. So to be able to build a connection here, for example, you would need to play a fairy card, but also a black bus card, to be able to build this connection. Once you have made your connection, you also need to move your victory point token. To see how many steps you should move it on the victory point track, we need to look at this little table up here in the corner of the player board. If you manage to place 1 wagon, you would get 1 point. 2 wagons, 2 points. 3 wagons, 4 points. And 5 wagons, you get 10 points. You then move your little victory point token here according to the points. That was the second action, to build a connection out on the board with your little trains here, by using the cards on your hand. Depending on how long that connection is, you need to throw away a certain amount of cards, matching the colors of the connection you would like to build. The third and last action you can choose to do is to draw a ticket card. On these cards, you have a certain connection that is built up by several connections out on the board. And you need to complete these connections to score by the end of the game. If you do not manage to build these connections, well, then you will actually lose points instead. But let me show you how they work. So on this ticket card here, you can see that we need to build a connection all the way from the Japanese garden going up to the Embarcadero, meaning all the way down here, going all the way up there. So the pink player here needs to build the 2 last connections as well. If they manage to fill that connection from the start to finish, they get the score stated up in the right corner by the end of the game. You can build this connection any way you would like to, as long as you have 1 long row going from the start to the finish line. Just remember that other players might want to block you out, destroying your plan. And that was the third and final action a player can choose to do. Take some ticket cards. The player gets to take up 2 of these cards, and they can throw back 1 if they don't want that one, but they can also choose to keep both of them. And you can have an unlimited amount of these cards on your hand as well. But as I told you, in the scoring phase, if you have any cards on your hand that you have not been able to resolve, you will get a penalty for that card. And that was the 3 things a player can choose to do during their turn. Either they can choose to place out some trains on the map and make the connections, or they can choose to get some transportation cards, or ticket cards. Once you have done your turn, it moves on to the player on your left, and so on. And that's the way the game goes on until a player has 2 or less trains in front of them. Once this happens, the other players have 1 more turn to do whatever they can to try to win the game. Once they have done their last turn, we go into the scoring phase. The players now need to add up the value for any completed ticket cards that they have in front of them. And they need to take away the amount of victory points from any of the cards that they did not manage to complete during their game. Then we also need to count how many souvenir tokens we have in front of us. And depending on how many tokens we have, we will get a certain amount of points. Up in the corner of the boards, you can see how many points you get depending on how many tokens you have. 1 or 0 would give you 0, 2 would give you 1, 3 would give you 2, and so on. We then need to take those amounts and add them up with the amount we have already received from building the different connections. And now we have a winner. If there are any draws, the player that has completed most ticket cards becomes the winner. If there are still any draws, well then we are happy to share that victory, right? And that, my friend, is how you play Ticket to Ride San Francisco. A player takes their turn and do 1 of the 3 possible actions. Then the turn goes out to the player to the left, and that's the way the game goes on until a player has 2 or less trains in front of them. Then we go into 1 final turn, and once that is done, we count some scores, and ta-da! We have a winner. Ticket to Ride is a game that has been around quite some time, and if you have not been living under a rock, you have probably heard about it before. It comes in a variety of different shapes, sizes and themes. The games are quite easy to learn, they're quite easy to get into, and they are really nice, easy-going family games where you can sit down and have a competition, have a bit of strategy, and just have a good evening with friends and family. It might not be for the heavy gamers out there that likes really heavy Euro games, or the ones that likes miniatures and so on, but if you just want to have a casual game night with a casual player, well then this game is quite good for you to have. The artwork in this game is light, it's colorful, and it's fun. It's not super detailed, you don't have a bunch of things on each card, but you don't need that in a game like this. The artwork simply does the trick. You have light colors, it's fun for kids to watch, it's fun for the whole family, and it's easy to understand the different cards and what you can do on them. There's no text on the cards, so it's really language independent. The rules themselves are quite easy to learn. So you could basically put this game up in front of any new or old player and you will be playing in no time. And I think that's where the artwork helps also, because there's not too many symbols, there's not too many things on the cards distracting the new players. There is simply just really outgoing, light, easy artwork that helps the player understanding what they can or cannot do. The rulebook, or pamphlet as I would say, is really thin. And if you sit down and read this, you will read through this in basically 5 minutes. I mean, 3 minutes even. It takes no time at all to read these rules. It is not hard to explain the rules for anyone. Have you played 1 round, then all players will surely understand how to play this game. There you have it, my friend. That's how you play Ticket to Ride San Francisco. If you want to know more about this game, there will be links down in the description, so be sure to check that out. These games can be found pretty much everywhere. And if you want a casual, fun, fast little game, well, this one is probably for you, because that is exactly what you're gonna get here. It is a cool game to sit down with family and friends and simply just have a good, relaxed, easy time. So if you want to know more, well, check it out down in the description. If you want to follow me on social media, well, I am called Genders Gaming everywhere. If you want to subscribe to the channel, that would make me so happy. If you do not want to subscribe to the channel, well, maybe give me a thumbs up or come back in the future and see if you want to subscribe then instead. Most importantly is to please keep on spreading that board gaming love I know you all have. Peace.